everyone, my name is Inonge, and I'm just going to be sharing my own experience of what it's like to be a Black person in a conservative evangelical type of church, and also, I guess, some things to think through of what it might feel like or be like for an ethnic minority to be in your church, and some of those blind spots that we might have in a way that hopefully helps you as church leaders of the gospel. And I just want to start off by highlighting why this matters, why this is important, because I think it might seem like just something to chat about race, ethnicity, its own trend, the Black Lives Matter protest last summer. Now we all need to talk about it. And I think for the majority culture looking on, it might seem that way. It might seem like this is something new. But actually, for the people that have been on the experience of some of the things that have been discussed, this has been an ongoing conversation. I've been in discussions since I moved to Scotland 14 years ago with people from different kinds of ethnic minority backgrounds about our experiences, and we've shared those in private conversations. The only difference, the only change, I guess, is that now people feel more open. Like, I should feel comfortable to share my experience. It's not just me, other people have experienced the same. And so it matters, I think, because it impacts a group of people that are made in God's image, that we want to share the gospel with, that will be part of our congregations. And I think it's important at this point to distinguish this, again, from corporate type diversity training, the sort, nobody really wants to be there, but, they've been dragged along and they just have to sit and endure it. This matters because we're talking about the church. We love Jesus and we love his church, and it's the church that he says will be built from people that come from different tribes and nations and all people groups. And so we should want to care about it because this impacts Christ's church. So I just want to share a few blind spots. We could talk about this for ages, but I just want to share 3 main blind spots on things that you might not be aware of as a church leader with your congregation when it comes to the experience of people from ethnic minority backgrounds. And when I'm talking about this, I think it's important to maybe have 2 groups of people in mind, because I think those are the groups of people that we will have in our church from, a diversity of ethnic backgrounds. There are people that are outsiders looking in, and I would say these would be people that they may be just checking out your church, they want to visit, they maybe not, they've maybe just moved to the country, they've maybe never been in an evangelical conservative church, they're just testing the waters a little bit. And then there are people that are already in your congregation, that are already in. I would probably fall into that category. I've always, even when I lived in Zambia, gone to I went to a Reformed church in Zambia, and so that's kind of always been my context. So it's nothing new for me to walk into a church where, we're singing hymns. We used to sing them a cappella. Just bear that in mind, because the experiences will vary, the experiences will differ, with some of the points that I'm raising. And the first is partiality and the impact of that partiality on ethnic minority people. If you're not in the minority, it's actually difficult to pick up on this. And so often when I've brought this up in conversation, people are like, surely not. I mean, we're friendly people, aren't we? Scotland, Glasgow is a friendlier city. Just like, yes, in one sense. But thinking about this, just to give you a few examples, I asked a few people what their experience was in general of walking into some of our churches. And they say things like, oh, people tend to just stare at me and give me a polite smile, but then move on. And people talk to me, but in a kind of pitiful, I'm feeling sorry for you kind of way. People give me the sort of look that says you're not really in, but we'll try, we'll just do our best. And so there's a sense in which there's a polite welcome, but it's different. You're being treated differently. And for the person maybe saying things or doing things, they might not even realize that that's what they're doing, that they're projecting certain biases that they might have onto somebody else. But it's usually the person on the receiving end of the partiality that remembers it for years and years to come. Ask any minority person, they'll give you very specific examples of this one time this happened, this one time this happened. And if you ask the person where that situation arose with, they probably wouldn't even remember. And so just not making the assumption that just because people believe the gospel, of course the gospel does transform us. But we all have blind spots, we all have partiality. And that's why the psalmist is able to confess and ask God to even forgive his hidden faults. He knows that there'll be things that even he doesn't pick up. And so don't be afraid to preach against this explicitly. The implications of that. How do we treat our neighbors? How do we treat people that look different from us? What do we think? I think sometimes people are even scared. I remember one person, the feedback was like, Inonge, I just want people to be normal. Just like, they had experienced two extremes. One extreme, people just wouldn't engage with them. People would just kind of look at them. And the other extreme was people were constantly apologizing, constantly like, oh, I don't know what to say to you. And I just wish people would just treat me like a normal person, like a brother, like a sister in Christ. And so that's one blind spot that our churches can have in terms of some of the perceptions that we might have, or some of the ways in which we might engage with ethnic minorities in a way that makes them feel, I don't know if I could belong here. So partiality, I guess, would maybe be more relevant to the outsider looking in, the type of person that will come experience that and they're not coming back. Especially if somebody has moved from another culture, another experience, the church is the place that they think, this is going to be my refuge, this is where I'll belong. And when they don't feel that sense of belonging, life is already difficult as it is in the rest of society, they just won't return. And it's so important to really grasp that. And so that's the first thing I wanted to highlight, is partiality, and calling that out, repenting of it, and preaching against it in an explicit way, not assuming that people already know. As sinful human beings, we're not always aware of some of our hidden thoughts, as it were. And the second thing is thinking of diversity, the diversity within our diversities. I guess this might be the issue for maybe the person that's already an insider. I have many conversations where people are being nice and they're trying to have conversations, and they like to remind me of the trip to India. I don't know, I'm Zambian, I don't know what India has to do with me. Or somebody, they're talking to an Indian person and they tell the Indian person about somebody they know from Nigeria. It's just this idea that all ethnic minorities are the same. And I know I've been using the phrase to just, capture a wide range of group of people, but they're not a monolith. They're different. Somebody that comes from, even within the African continent, like West African culture is different from Southern African culture. I'll hang out with some Ghanaian friends and I'm like, what are you eating? And it's different. We're not the same. And that's good. That is beautiful. That is a reflection of what it is to be made as different people that are made in God's image, and reflecting that diversity. And so trying not to, in all of this, try and put people in a box and try and make them fit what they might not necessarily fit. And I think the implications of this would be, do we leave room for people to kind of be themselves in one way? Are we comfortable with different cultural expressions of how people might act, or how they might speak, or how they might behave? And if you think about our training, do we train people in such a way that if they speak a certain way, it's not expository enough? I remember a friend pointing this out to me when I was giving a talk, and this is how I noticed that I was in the in circle. I gave a talk, and his feedback was, and he mentioned the parachurch organization. Just sounded very English, and you're Zambian. I don't know how that works. It made me think. I was like, oh, I've done all this training in how to exposit the Bible, but clearly all the patterns I've seen have done it a certain way, that I've picked up on that, and somehow I've internalized that and thought that that's a good way of teaching the Bible, must come with a certain way of expression. And so I toned myself down every now and again, like, you don't want to be too charismatic, gotta be biblical. And so those are some of the implications, like living room for people to express their uniqueness in cultural identities, and not putting them all in a box. And we've got African people in the church. Which part of Africa are they from? And what are some of those unique aspects of that? Third blind spot might be tokenism. We might have our hearts in the right place and want to see diversity in our churches. We might want our church communities to look like the surrounding communities that they live in. But let's just be careful that we don't mirror the kind of diversity programs that the world does. And the diversity of the Christian church is not forced. Jesus said himself he would build his church, and the church he's building is going to be multi-ethnic. And so just being careful that when we're asking people to do things, it must be because we genuinely believe that they're gifted in a certain area. It must be because we genuinely think they're going to serve in a certain way. And that might need to challenge some of our partiality, because are we thinking that people don't have something to contribute because they're too different? And so those two kind of come hand in hand, but just guarding against that tokenism. I think it's okay to recognize, okay, maybe I've been biased in the past against this, and it would be great to just give so-and-so an opportunity. And I think that's different from, we're just going to put so-and-so on a podium because then we're going to look, diverse. And so that's the kind of final blind spot. And the last thing that I just want to encourage you to do is just all of this, pray. Pray regularly. You can have as many conversations as you can about diversity and how can I church this, that. But if we're never intentionally praying for it, it'll always be something that just comes around once a year whenever it's brought up or whenever it's in the media. And it should be something that is just part of our normal conversations. We should want to have people that feel included from all people groups, from all social backgrounds, from all ethnic backgrounds. That should be something that we long for and pray for. And I believe, and I've seen it, I've seen churches change and become more welcoming. I've seen people change and become, talk to you like a normal person. And I just firmly believe that God is able to do that when we are intentional about it and when we pray for him to help us to highlight some of those blind spots and give us wisdom on how best to tackle them. So I hope that's helpful and gives you a few things to think through.